Focus. I'm your host, James Taylor, and today I'm delighted to have as my guest Ronda Penrice.
Yes.
Is it Rasha?
Rasha.
May I call you Ronda?
Oh, yes. Perfect.
Welcome to the Atlanta Fulton Public Library.
Thank you.
By way of introduction, we're going to be talking about Ronda's first book, African American History for Dummies, published by Wiley just a few months ago. If you go to Google or go to any other really good search engine and type in Ronda Penrice, you'll find out that she has written for Essence Magazine, Vibe Magazine, Our Own Creative Loafing. There's a short story lurking out there in the web somewhere. You're busy as a bee in the writing industry, and yet you've found the time to write a 412-page book on African American history. I want you to do most of the talking. So let me ask you this, Miss Ronda. Where did this book come from? African American History for Dummies.
Well, actually, it was Wiley's idea.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, at least doing Google searches as you have, that this book was supposed to have come out in 2005 and 2006, but people kept dropping out. So I have a friend, Tanya Bolden, who I'm sure the library is stocked full of her books. She's written so many. One of her friends was slated to do it and dropped out. And so they asked her, and she couldn't do it, and she recommended me. But it wasn't as easy as that. I still had to, I sent them my resume, all my a list of published works that I've had basically since I started writing, and I had to do a sample chapter and so forth. So that process started about February 2006, and by May of 2006 I was writing.
Incredible, incredible. And I should have added that you graduated from Columbia University. You were writing there.
Oh yes, I was an English and history major. I wrote a lot of papers. It was just natural for me at Columbia, especially being an English and history major. You read a lot of books and you write huge papers. So when I went to graduate school, as you know, at the University of Mississippi.
Southern Studies?
Yes, I did Southern Studies, which is the only program in the United States where you can get a degree, a graduate degree in Southern Studies. You can go to other schools, such as University of North Carolina, and do American Studies with a concentration in the American South, but it's the only program that is Southern Studies.
Now, let me set you up for this question, because I'm a bibliophile and a librarian. I love books. You walk into a library, you walk into a bookstore, and you see a rack of books. Now, in my case, I've studied philosophy and psychology. I see a book called Philosophy for Dummies, and I say, I spent 4 years of my life studying this, and they write a book called for Dummies. There are people who spend their entire lives studying, teaching, and writing about African American history. Where do you get off writing a book about this very subject for dummies? And you know what I'm saying. Saying this with a smile on my face. What is this Dummies series?
Well, Dummies, all Dummies.
Thanks for understanding.
All Dummies is basically, I like to say it's in English. So it's very straightforward. It breaks down the pivotal events and you know, pivotal happenings, you know, in simple layman term. Because, you know, I've poured through a lot of books, and trying to condense the information is very difficult. I say that to people, particularly with my book, that though there's a lot of information in it, the aim is for it to be conversational. I hope that people will read it and want to go and learn more, and go to their local libraries and go to the bookstores and purchase more books and read more books about African American history.
What I loved about the book is that in the course of just having been a librarian for most of my adult life, I know a lot about African American history, and I'll read one chapter and say, you know, I know that, but I'll read another chapter, I didn't know that, and it's a great reference work. I mean, if like when did the first Africans come to the United States? Oh, 1619, Jamestown, but were they slaves? And you set that up, and it's very nice.
Well, it was very good, because traditionally we had been taught that they were closer to slaves, and the scholarship on that, where they've identified where the first Africans that arrived to what would become the United States of America, that scholarship is about 10 years old. And so recently, in May of this year, or 2007 I should say, there was the 400th anniversary of the founding of Jamestown, and part of that exhibit revealed this.
The Queen came over, right?
Yes, part of that exhibit revealed that, you know, we could indeed trace those Africans to like the San Miguel Batista, which probably came from Rwanda, Angola, and so forth. So that, I mean, it shows how vibrant this bill is. And even when I get comments from people who said I studied in school, well, I've been doing a lot on African American history, and in the course of doing this book, I learned things that I didn't know.
In the course of, and I know you've been in academia for a long time, I call it the graduate student syndrome. You're assigned a research paper, and you don't know when to stop researching. Because the hardest part is not the writing. That's kind of easy sometimes. But when to say, I've done enough research, time. What happened with you in this situation?
Oh, that was very hard, because one of the things that you have to do, you have to really grasp the research before you can start to condense it. And so there were times when some chapters would take longer than others because I had to read more information. And luckily, because I have been a journalist for about the better of 10 years, and I've specialized in African American publications and African American subject matter, I have been exposed to a wide variety of things. But there were subjects, such as my theater subject, I am not as well versed, so I had to take extra time and consult various sources to find out what the leading books are and read them myself. I mean, this was a very, very, very arduous process.
Yes, it is.
I spent a minimum of 10 to 16 hours per day for 9 months working.
Are you serious? I was trying to pry that out of you, but thanks for volunteering.
Oh yes, I had my friends didn't know, my friends and family members didn't know that I was doing this, because it was such an overwhelming task, and I just didn't think I could also have people ask me how was it going. And so I didn't tell people, and I was never sure from day to day that I would actually get through it. So I just, for me, because my family, I grew up in part of my life in Brookhaven, Mississippi, and part of my life in Chicago.
You're a child of America.
Yes, so and actually going back and forth. So I shouldn't say, I've spent the majority of my childhood years in Chicago, but my family very much, when you hear about migration and so forth, I spent my childhood going back and forth in between Chicago and Mississippi. So on one hand, with my grandparents, I was on a farm, and as people would, like the things that they show in movies, we have relatives that gone off to Milwaukee, Chicago, Lansing, Michigan, and holidays were very big times, and of course, when there were funerals and family reunions, and so people would come back, and I would be like the youngest person in those conversations. So my family would talk about different instances. Now, they wouldn't necessarily talk about more difficult times, like for them going through the civil rights movement. I actually, when I went back to Mississippi to study at the University of Mississippi for my MA in Southern Studies, my grandparents, who have since passed, were alive, and as I would encounter different subject matter there, it would give me an opportunity to sit down and talk to my grandparents, or just, them being much older, and as we would drive different places, my grandfather might, tell me what it was like, because he was, as a child, his family had been sharecroppers, and he'd show me different places in the county or surrounding counties where my family is from, where his family had sharecropped. And through the course of doing our own history for our family reunions, my aunt discovered that the land in which my family lives on, which is about 30 acres, had been an area where some of our relatives had, sharecropped. I don't know necessarily if they had been enslaved there, but I know that they had sharecropped there as well.
So you've lived this history as well as written about it.